Hi, folks. One of the most frequent questions we get from partners and distributors in Genos is how should I position the Genos offering against other well known competitors when I encounter them in clients or prospects? And I think the best person to answer that is the founder of the organization, Ben Palmer. And in this brief presentation and subsequent interview, Ben talks through exactly how to position Genos against the major competition. I think the key point to take away from this is always when you're positioning against somebody else, make it about you, about the strengths of your offering and the Genos offering and what you can bring to the table, rather than getting on the back foot and defending against the competition. So listen to how Ben lays out exactly how we position ourselves and how you should position yourself against the competition. Welcome, folks. My name is Derek McCann, and I'm delighted today to be able to introduce to you the founder of Genos International and one of the creators of the Genos model, Ben Palmer. Welcome, Ben.
G'day. Hi, everyone. Hi, thanks, Derek.
And Ben is going to talk today specifically about how we as partners and distributors of Genos should position the Genos assessment against other assessments and look at what are the particular benefits of the Genos model versus some of the others that you're going to encounter in the marketplace, and how do you deal with it when you come across a competitive assessment. So Ben, over to you. I know you have a few slides to walk through, and then maybe we'll do a little bit of a Q&A.
Sure. Thanks. All right. So, yeah, as you heard, Derek's asked me to perhaps put a few thoughts together on how to position the Genos Emotional Intelligence Assessment in the market and what some of the unique features are of it on that basis. So firstly, in terms of positioning against the market, if you look at the market for emotional intelligence, there seems to be three layers to it. The first layer is what I call the forward approach, if you like, which is a sort of less premium end of the market, if you like. Assessments that are very inexpensive to use. They're not well validated in a research, particularly in academic research. They're a little bit Mickey Mouse, if you like, but they're popular and they're widely used. And assessments that I put into this category are ones like the Talent Smart approach or the assessment by 6 seconds. The next layer of the market you might call a Volvo. This is where MHS seem to sit really, with products like the EQI 2.0 and the Mesquite. MHS have seemed to have captured the middle ground, if you like, with assessments that are a bit more well researched. They're a little bit more expensive in price. They usually come with a few more bells and whistles, and they kind of seem to sit in this layer of the market. And then finally, you have the premium end of the market, where Hay Group and where Genos really is positioned and is sitting. These approaches are ones where you either have big names behind them, like Richard Boyatzis and Daniel Goleman, or in our case, you have a premium kind of product suite. It's not just an emotional intelligence assessment. There are a lot of different things that we've put with Genos to make it, if you like, the Mercedes-Benz of the market. And so Hay Group, now with Korn Ferry, have gone down the approach of making it premium by putting the names behind it, and indeed having a premium assessment. It's well researched, widely used by Fortune 500 companies every day. We've put ourselves into that bracket, not so much by the names behind the assessment, but by the actual premium features of the product itself. Yeah. So this is one way of looking at the market and the levels of it, Derek.
Okay, great. And you mentioned there's another way of looking from a sort of more functional perspective.
Yeah, so one way is looking at the market is this way. The other way of looking at the market is the approach that different assessment types have taken. So when you look at the market this way, there are a number of main kind of approaches, if you like. The first is the so-called ability approach that has really been captured by the Mesquite, mostly because the Mesquite really is the only widely used ability approach to emotional intelligence on the assessment market today. And this approach is one where you basically are trying to measure emotional intelligence like you would measure IQ. You have a suite of questions for which there are more or less correct answers. And this approach really is trying to tap into what are people's actual emotional abilities. This approach is very well suited to recruitment, for example. Why? Because the questions are very difficult to fake. The most correct answer is not immediately obvious. And it really does perhaps tap what someone's emotional abilities might actually be. The second approach is what I call the talent assessment approach. And I call it the talent assessment approach because this approach involves models that are broad and deep, models that measure, if you like, a large number of variables. Now, in the case of the Byron EQI or the EQI 2.0, it's measuring a mixture of traits and competencies and skills around emotional intelligence, by way of example. In considering the emotional and social competency inventory by Boyatzis and Goleman, their approach there is to measure a wide range of competencies. And I call that talent assessment because that's what it's really probably best suited to. Broad, deep measures that measure a lot of things. Why it's suited to talent assessment, I guess, is this gives you quite a big window into an individual. This kind of approach isn't very well suited, in my opinion, to development. Why? Because you spend a lot of time trying to understand the model and the assessment and not enough time thinking about what to do with it. It's very hard to workshop these very large models like this. The type of person who's attracted to this kind of approach tends, in fact, to sit in talent assessment and development in an organization. They tend to be organizational psychologists or talent management specialists who like large amounts of data on an individual. The participants themselves, when you put them through this approach, these are the type of reports people get and go, oh, goodness me, 44 pages, too big, whack it in the drawer, forget about it, and move on to the next development experience. So the approach we've taken is really to focus in on the development area, to create a model and an assessment that's best suited to developing people's emotional intelligence. That's why our model only has 6 competencies in it. What's the unique feature of that? Well, it's more accessible, it's more memorable, and it creates a language for being emotionally intelligent at work. It's easier to present in group workshops. It's easier to debrief around. Most of the debrief is not about the model and the measure and how it's scored. Most of the debrief is actually about, here are the behaviors. You can see a couple here that you could perhaps really utilize as strengths and a couple that are really development opportunities. What are you going to do about it? Even though our model is smaller and more accessible, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not deep. In fact, our 6 competencies are measured by 7 behaviors. And that's, in fact, one of the most deepest measurements of competencies on the market. If you look at the EQI 2.0, I think it measures 15 different variables by 144 items. So when you actually divide up the number of competencies and the number of items in the assessment, you can see that our approach is certainly accessible and memorable, but it doesn't lack depth. Each of our competencies are actually measured by a broad range of behaviors associated with it. However, being less competencies does also mean that the assessment is smaller. It's only 42 questions. In fact, it's one of the smallest in the EQ space. The Mesquite takes about 45 minutes to do. Ours takes about 20 minutes to do. The EQI takes about, and the emotional and social competency inventory, both take about 30 and 25 minutes respectively. Ours takes 20. At 42 questions, believe me, if you're a manager with 8 direct reports that you're rating, this is a very important, unique feature to you. Finally, our assessment doesn't just measure how well someone demonstrates their emotional intelligence. It also measures how important it is that they demonstrate emotional intelligence to the people they're working with. Why is that a unique feature? Well, all the assessments on the market take that approach of validating in large data whether emotional intelligence is important or not. And we've indeed done that. We've done all the psychometric reliability and validity studies. What we do, however, is we try to bring the individual's contexts, which is also really important, into the assessment report by asking people how important it is at this point in time that your boss demonstrates or your team member demonstrates emotionally intelligent workplace behavior. That really brings a whole new level of focus. There are individuals you'll find when you're debriefing that are really engaged by the research. Oh, the research tells me I need to be emotionally intelligent. Great, let's look at my assessment report. Yeah. Then there are individuals who actually couldn't give two hoots about research that you might have done 10 years ago on emotional intelligence. They're much more interested in, is this really important? Are my people saying this is important? So what this unique feature does is it really captures a broader level of engagement. We have an approach that's certainly going to engage that side, if you like, of the participant, but also the skeptics, or also the people who aren't that interested in research. They're more interested in what their own people have got to say is important to them. Of course, levels of important ratings also give you another layer of interest in the debrief too. They also allow you to look at the mindset, if you like, around emotional intelligence in an organization. Aggregated up, you can go straight into an organization and say, this instrument's validated in large data, and we've now validated it in your organization to the extent that we've looked at how important it is to your people that these are behaviors that need to be demonstrated. And that's a really unique feature. Finally, obviously, with our approach, as you would have experienced in accreditation, we really tried to support the model and the assessment by a substantial amount of development material, and you won't get that wherever else you go. So as you know, we have individual contributor reports and leadership reports. They're actually two slightly different versions of our assessment ourselves. What the unique feature, I guess, of this is for an organization is you can go into an organization and say, we can actually bring an approach to emotional intelligence for you that you can put your leaders through and your individual contributors through. Organizations are often interested in cultural change. Organizations are often interested in how do we make emotional intelligence stick in our organization. And having both of these sets of material allow you to work at both these levels in organizations, which is really important sometimes in the longer term views that they might have around what they want to do with this. Does that make sense, Derek?
Yeah, it makes tremendous amount of sense, and I think that's one of the things, as you say, that really does set us apart from other folks. That you do have that applied leadership model, you do have the individual contributor version as well. So, yeah.
The other thing, of course, is we have development tip workbooks, one for the individual contributor and one for the leadership. These are really dictionaries on what to do about your emotional intelligence results, and this is an important feature. Whenever somebody gets an assessment report, they also get one of these development tip workbooks. This makes your life as a consultant easier. It allows you to quickly look up information with your candidate there and use it to spawn ideas, if you like, about how to address particular assessment questions that people want to shift the needle on, if you like.
Yep.
So you get both the what and the how with our approach. The what being the emotional intelligence assessment results, and these development tips workbooks really being the how. We also know, as you would have been taught in accreditation, we have a best practice approach to assessing and developing and debriefing emotional intelligence. You would have realized that we have introductory workbooks. We then have the assessment reports themselves, of course, and we have the debriefing process. Why is this important? A lot of organizations start programs with the debrief. Yeah. They don't start programs with, hey, why are we doing this? What is the model? What is the measure? How do we choose raters? What do we expect to get when we get into the debrief? And what our introductory workbooks and this approach do is it helps you to come in and actually implement a much better approach to emotional intelligence. I can't tell you how many times clients have said to me, when I say clients, I mean the participant themselves, gee, that was really valuable, the approach you took. In my debrief session with you, we didn't spend the first half an hour of it understanding what the model is and how the assessment is scored and interpreted. We were able to move directly to the results and spend a lot more of the debrief on what to do about my results. And that was really valuable.
Sure.
That's what people say to us. So what's a summary of the unique features? We've got leadership and individual contributor approaches. What's unique about that, I guess, is it allows you to work at multiple levels in an organization around emotional intelligence. We have the demonstration and the importance ratings. And that allows you to validate the assessment very quickly, either for a group, for a team, or in an organization itself. It allows you to go in and say, we've now measured 50 people, 50 leaders by way of example, and we can tell you that the direct reports of those leaders rate very highly the level of importance around these behaviors. These are the types of things they want to see their boss demonstrating.
Yeah.
And of course, we have the substantial development material around our model and measure. What's unique about that? Talk to your clients and say, we're not going to be about what emotional intelligence is. We're going to help you actually start to change behaviors. And that's really important. A lot of people will tell you, great, yes, we had a workshop on emotional intelligence. It was all about what emotional intelligence is and not enough about what to do with it.
Yeah.
And our approach allows you to cut more quickly through that and into what to do about your emotional intelligence. Finally, one of the most unique features of our approach to emotional intelligence is our engagement assessment that you can optionally tack on for return on investment purposes. What do I mean by this? As you may know, we have an 8-item engagement survey that measures whether people say this is a great place to work, whether people are committed to the organization, and whether they're thinking about other opportunities in the market that might be presented to them, whether they go above and beyond what's expected of them, and whether they continuously try to improve what they do. What these really are 4 value-creating behaviors. When employees do this well, they're actually promoting your employment brand, which makes your organization more attractive to potential talent. When they demonstrate this or say they're engaged in this well, what this means is you have a strong levels of organizational commitment and strong talent retention metrics going on in your organization. This obviously tells you about discretionary effort, and this talks about the mindset or the culture of innovation in your organization. Are people just turning up and doing their job, or are they also of a mindset of continuously trying to improve what they do? You can tack these 8 engagement questions on to any assessment and any category. So you can look at self-scores and self-engagement scores at the beginning of a program. You can look at those at the end of a program. You can look at self and direct report scores of engagement and emotional intelligence at the beginning and at the end. Or you can do things like tack them on just to the direct reports of leaders. So you can get direct reports rating how emotionally intelligent they think their boss is and how engaged they are personally. And imagine that at the beginning of a program and at the end of the program, and you being able to report back to your client not only how much you shifted the needle on emotional intelligence, but what that actually meant in terms of employees in the organization and whether they were promoting your employment brand, likely to leave or not, their levels of discretionary effort and their mindset around continuous improvement. Let me give you an example. Here is an engagement snapshot for a leader. This case here is where somebody has set up a project where they've measured their boss's emotional intelligence and their direct reports level of engagement. You get, sorry, Siri's going off in the background. So you get a snapshot like this that tells the leader, okay, 51% of your team are currently engaged. 30% of them are nearly engaged. I call these the clock on, clock offers. And 15% and 4% are really not engaged or disengaged. You've really got, okay, 20%, 2 out of 10 people in the team where their engagement is really quite low. Yeah. And you can see at the beginning of a program. So you can provide individual snapshots like this, and you can aggregate it up at the beginning and end of programs. So this is a case study that you can go and read more about on our website. You can see time 1 and time 2 levels of demonstration expressed as a percentile across a program. And on average, if you total these up, you get a 24% improvement in emotional intelligence. Here's the engagement snapshots also aggregated. So at the beginning of this program, and this is a large government organization, you can see that only 22% of people in the organization were engaged underneath these leaders. And there was about 60 leaders that we put through the program. And you can see what were the biggest problems from an engagement perspective. Large amounts of people saying, this isn't a great place to work, I'm thinking of leaving, and I'm not really putting in much discretionary effort. What you can see after the program is we essentially doubled levels of engagement. We went from 22 to 42%, and we really improved talent retention, discretionary effort, and we saw some improvements too in terms of how people were feeling about the organization. What might shifts like this mean? Well, in Australia, Aon Hewitt have done research showing a 10% improvement for an ASX 200 listed company. That's like our version of the Fortune 500, if you like. Yeah. Typically returns $28 million to the bottom line. So if you're to use that maths, say a 22% improvement, you can kind of double it. So we're looking at a 60 million improvement to the bottom line of an organization. If this had have been the results right across the leadership group, in a large organization.
Right.
So thank you, Derek. I hope that sort of covered off the main things that you wanted me to cover off.
Yeah, it really did, and thanks for that, Ben. Very succinct and very to the point. And I think the people who are watching this, our distributors and our partners, have heard me and the other certifiers say this before, but we shouldn't underestimate just how instrumental EI is in driving engagement, and just how big a thing it is to be able, in a single sitting, to be able to take a view of a leader's engagement, right?
Absolutely. If you look on our website, there's a case study there that we did with IBM, where we looked at the extent to which a leader's emotional intelligence actually accounts for variance in employee engagement scores. Yeah. And we found that about 50% of an individual's engagement score, or the variability in engagement, can be accounted for by the quality of their leadership, and in particular, their emotionally intelligent leadership. Yeah. What we've got on the website that's coming soon is we've started to look at individual contributors' levels of emotional intelligence and engagement. And we're also seeing there that your level of emotional intelligence actually accounts for about 25% of your own engagement score. Wow. So it's not only the emotional intelligence of your boss, but it's your emotional intelligence that contributes to your engagement. And if you think about that, it makes a lot of sense. The more self-aware, the more empathetic you are, probably you're going to build better relationships at work. Then the better you are at managing your emotions and positively influencing the way others feel, the better you are at your own resilience, and the more engaging you're likely to be around. So, people who are better at managing their emotions are more resilient. Yeah. People who are better at awareness and empathy are better at building the relationships with others. And I think it's the combination of those sorts of things that help you come to work with a disposition, if you like, or a level of enthusiasm and optimism and worldview that's probably healthier than the person who says, I'm not really self-aware, I don't feel like I'm managing my emotions very well, and so on.
Yeah. One other thing, which I think, and I find very impactful, and it's one of the things that really attracted me to Genos in the early days when we first met, and that was the amount of peer-reviewed research that you have behind the model. When you meet a knowledgeable buyer, somebody who understands the technical manuals and understands the importance of research, I found it really does make their socks roll up and down. I mean, can you explain why that is just such an important item?
Sure, and this is what differentiates that first layer of the market, particularly from ourselves. Why that is important is simply large organizations in particular know the risks of using an assessment that's not well validated in research, and they also know that the gold standard for that is not research by the authors in a case study or in a white paper, that the gold standard for that is actually peer-reviewed research in academic journals. That's what's defensible in court, so that if you put somebody through the assessment and they resign and they point to the assessment as the reason for the resignation and the debrief and all the rest of it, the organization and the consultant can stand up and say, well, this was a well-validated approach. It's an instrument that properly reflects levels of emotional intelligence and so on. That's why large organizations will go down that route. In fact, I'll never forget the first time we engaged with UBS. UBS had an internal psychological team, PhD qualified, and if you couldn't satisfy their requirements around reliability and validity, you couldn't work in the organization. And so, it's no small thing to have proper peer-reviewed research around an instrument. The gold standard, if you like, the gold-plated gold standard really is where some of that research is not by the test authors like myself or Con or Dr. Gignac, by others. And we make our research available and our instrument available freely for research purposes. We have PhD students from India to America to South Africa doing research on our instrument, and you can see in the bibliography that there's research that's authored by many different authors around the world, not just ourselves, on the reliability and validity of our approach.
Yeah. And there's sometimes, I think people are sometimes been inclined to think that the poor reliability and poor validity numbers are something that are unique to the lower end of the market. But even some well-established tools, I mean, I read there recently the Mesquite doesn't have great numbers behind it. So it's good for our people to encourage a knowledgeable buyer to look at the numbers and look behind the curtain, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's several meta-analyses now. Meta-analyses are really research papers that are comparing all the research around all the instruments and sort of coming up with averages, if you like. And the Mesquite, by way of example, falls in the worst category for reliability and validity. That's not to say that it isn't reliable and there isn't some validity around it. It
Sure.
means when you compare that reliability and validity to the reliability and validity of other instruments, it's actually a little bit lackluster.
Yeah.
And if any of you ever need that kind of thing, feel free to reach out to me. I've got the meta-analyses and the sort of research that I can give you to help validate or substantiate claims like that.
Great. Ben, that's fantastic. That was exactly what we needed just to cover and just give people a good flavor of exactly how to present the tool when they are find themselves in a competitive situation. Somebody